Pleasant Friday evening to you. This is the Freddie Kissoon Show with co-host Leonard Craig. As you can see from our cameras, we have a guest who's been very, very willing to join us at each request. For the past 3 years, this may be his 7th or 6th appearance on this program. And we're very thankful to financial expert Bhagwandin to give us his views on a wide range of topics. It is budget time. The estimates will be debated next week. The actual budget was laid in Parliament, and so we know who gets what, when, and how. And so we will ask Bhagwandin to give us his thoughts on the budget. I'll start first by asking perhaps the simplest of question a media operative can ask his guest. Joel, beginning with A plus to D minus, what grade would you give this budget?
A.
A, okay. So, Leonard Craig is an economist, so I will defer to the two finance people here.
Let me just welcome again, Joel, but let me just follow up on what Freddie asked. From A plus to D minus, but you said A. What's the plus?
Actually, let me. Can I revise it? Let me give it a B. And the reason for the B, when I say that, I would imagine persons would think, what more did I expect in the budget? It's actually the inverse of that. And I'm coming from the position of the macro fundamentals and the risks that comes with this budget, given where we are now in terms of the macroeconomic framework. The risk is greater. It's a large budget in absolute terms. It's the smallest in relative terms, relative to GDP that is. It's now 20% of GDP. In the 90s, the budget was 60% of GDP. Up to in the early 2000s, it was about 43% of GDP. Now it's about 20% of GDP. The risk, however, in terms of macroeconomic risk, fiscal risk, is greater. Specifically, many persons, a lot of emphasis is placed on a few social welfare items in the budget, without looking at the broader and appreciating the broader macroeconomic or fiscal framework within which the budget is crafted. Already, the recurrent expenditure, the total current expenditure in the budget is more than 100% of non-oil revenue. It is 143% of non-oil revenue, which move the risk from low to moderate. So for that reason of the risk, I'm giving it a B, because we're taking more risk. Fiscally, we're taking more risk than previous years. Right? It's not a conservative budget. It's not a very conservative budget where the risk is concerned. And I can elaborate on that even further. There is often this concern about what is the inflationary impact on all the cash transfers. Yet you have persons contending that the subsidies, cash transfers, etc. are not enough. But if we look at how the fiscal framework has evolved from a risk analysis perspective, when you look at the share of subsidies, grants, and other fiscal incentives designed to cushion at a household level, we've moved from 1% of total household income in 2010, for example, to now 50% of total household income, excluding remittances. If we add remittances, it's about 38% of total household income. So we're spending more on recurrent expenditure, far exceeding our non-oil revenue or our tax revenue. And why that is not such a healthy thing to do in terms of fiscal prudence is because your recurrent expenditure really should not exceed your recurrent non-oil revenue, because oil prices are volatile. Today oil prices is back where it was in 2015. All right, so oil prices are volatile, and if you look at the revenue composition, the total NRF withdrawal is 495 billion. The total non-oil revenue is about 506 billion, greater than the NRF withdrawal. So in terms of fiscal prudence, right, you want to ensure that your recurrent expenditure in the budget is at least less than or minimum equal to your recurrent tax revenue. But we've gone over, which means the government is taking greater risk. And this is what people have to understand with the risk. If government now is to listen to, of course, they're taking greater risk to meet the needs and expectations of the population, but there is a limit. There's a limit, because if you go beyond a certain level, if you take it up, I would say there are three levels of risk, broadly speaking: low, moderate, and high. We have moved from low to moderate now in terms of what we're doing. In terms of the fiscal framework of this budget, it's now moderated risk. Not low, not high, but we're in the middle. And we've got to be careful not to take it in the high risk range, because you're going to end up in serious problems in the medium to long term. A place where we came from historically. You don't want to have a fiscal collapse. You don't want to we go down to the road of bankruptcy again, right? So that's why I said it's B, I put it on the scale of B, not because I expected more. In fact, strictly professionally speaking, it should have been more measured, it should have been less on the recurrent side. Because let me tell you now about the inflationary impact. There's the argument of, there's a legitimate concern about inflation. Yes, we're seeing increase in food prices. Now in the CPI, Consumer Price Index, you have different basket of goods. Each sub-indice carry different weight in that basket. All the other sub-indices, utilities, housing, telephone bills and that type of stuff, those indices have actually remained stable, and some of them you've actually had lower costs. For example, the biggest one is your telephone bill. Telephone bill as a direct result of government policies, liberalization of the sector, more competition in the sector, more investments by the private sector, enabled by government policy framework, have cheaper telephone data plan and so on, cheaper access than compared to 15 years ago. But food prices, because it's imported prices, it's two things fundamentally: imported food prices and demand and supply dynamics within the domestic market. In order to stabilize prices, it means we have to build out the economy, expand the productive base of the economy, expand production so that you can have stabilized prices. That takes time. And that is why the investment in infrastructure, all the capital projects and so on that we're undertaking, investing in the power plants, building the bridges, building the road infrastructure and all the other infrastructure and technology as well, those are important to, in the long run, stabilize prices, because you got to increase production. Coming back to the question of inflation and back to the risk, when you look at the level of savings deposit we have in the banking sector, the level of savings we have, individual savings have risen threefold in the last 5 years. Threefold. If you now look at what we call in economics, you would know this well, marginal propensity to consume, the MPC ratio. Marginal, for the viewers' benefit, the marginal propensity to consume is a ratio in economic analysis that measures what percentage or what share of additional income earned is spent on consumption, and that ratio also implies the marginal propensity to save. So when I look at that ratio based on the data and the framework, the economic models that I have, the marginal propensity to consume between the 2015 and 2020 period, at one time it was as high as 175% or 1.75. That ratio, situated within the economic conditions at that time, is consistent with the adverse conditions. You had high rates of unemployment, you had loss of income, you're talking about what happened in the sugar belt that had a knock-on effect in terms of the indirect impact on the welfare of people, losing jobs compounded by COVID and all, and of course not to mention the burdensome taxes imposed upon households by the APNU AFC government when they raised taxes, raised all those fees, took away effectively over $60 billion in disposable income, because that's the equivalent in additional taxes they collected as a result of those increase in fees and taxes and adding VAT on a whole range of other consumables that never attracted VAT: electricity, water, education, etc., healthcare items. So that ratio then means when you have a marginal propensity to consume ratio of more than 1, it means you're spending more money than the additional income earned. And where is that extra coming from? Where is the 0.75 coming from? It's either coming from borrowing or from your savings. And if you look at the data, it didn't come from borrowing, because in order to borrow, you got to have income to support that borrowed money, to support the repayment of that loan. So if you look at the trend in savings at that time, we saw savings dip. So people who lost income, who lost their jobs, they had to go into their savings, and so that is why the marginal propensity to consume then was 175%. Now, from 2020 to 2025, the marginal propensity to consume ratio is 60%. So that means people are spending 60 cents on every additional dollar earned between 2020 to 2025, which is a good thing. It means they're saving 40 cents on every dollar, or 40%, which is a good thing, because that is helping to stabilize inflation. And this again tied to my B grade, because if you have a sudden surge in spending on consumption, we're in trouble. All the extra money earned in that the government is giving out in social welfare and grants and wages, it will erode in value. If you have runaway inflation, then the value of the money becomes worthless. And so we have to guard against that, and that is why within the budget and within the next 5-year plans of the government as well, the work that they're undertaking in the financial sector to reform the financial sector, to introduce and to force the banks to look at innovative financing, take on more risk, creating investment vehicles and instruments so that people can take that extra savings that they have sitting in the bank that is earning an interest rate below the rate of inflation, which means you're losing value. Keeping your money in the bank, you're losing value. So you create investment vehicles and instruments so that those monies can be deployed into those assets to earn higher rates of return above the rate of inflation. So all that is important in terms of managing the risk that we see. So in summary, to pause here for now, Freddie, I know you want to say something, is that the budget is a great budget, but the budget is presented within the framework of moderated fiscal risk as opposed to conservative and lower risk that the government previously imposed, that the government previously undertook in previous terms. And obviously that's justified because of expectation of people and all of that, and the needs of people as well.
Before you go, Freddie, let me just ask a quick follow-up question. I got two concerns about what you presented just now. Concern number one, it sounds as though you are not a friend of shifting more money. Well, most of the recurrent expenditure comes through public servant wages and salaries, the pension, the disability thing, the school vouchers and all those kinds of things. Then you also mentioned that increases in taxes is hurting certain aspect of the to use your term, the conservativeness of the financial architecture. Now, how do you level the two? So if people are clamoring, let's say, to reduce taxes on vehicles, reduce taxes on gasoline and oils and so on, which means then that in as much money that could have been going to the treasury will not be going. It's
going to support cushioning household, yeah.
Right. And at the same time, people are also clamoring for raise in old age pension and all these other things. It therefore means then you raise on this side, lower on this side, then your recurrent expenditure will happen exactly as you outlined. It will become higher than the taxes you take in. But aren't you, or have you considered that the NRF or the income from oil and gas is also broadly government income, which is another form of taxation, so you can't entirely discount it as outside of the tax bracket, because we could have used another model for oil as we're using for the gold. You just give people a concession and then you take royalties and they do their business as they choose, sell as much gold as they want. We could have done that with oil and say, mine for oil how much ever you want, but pay us X amount in royalties and that's it. No. So aren't you excluding what we're getting from oil under loosely the bracket of tax?
From a strict risk analysis perspective, that is why I excluded it, and not just for excluding its sake. The exclusion of in a strict risk fiscal risk analysis, you gotta exclude the non-oil revenue, the oil revenues, because if you go back to the Natural Resource Fund Act, that resources, your oil revenue is to be expended on only three things. Only three things, none of which is recurrent, none of which is to fund recurrent social welfare. That is to fund transformational development. In other words, the capital side of the budget. Now, you have two types of capital expenditure. you have capital expenditure in new projects to expand production or to expand output. So, for example, the new road networks, the new power plant, new bridge, those are capital expenditure on new projects to expand output. Then you have maintenance capital, which is to maintain, you build the infrastructure, you have to maintain it. So, strictly speaking, if we go to the legislation now, the legal framework in which that fund is to be utilized, it is to be expended on those types of projects. So in healthcare, for example, you have capital expenditures that would build out the healthcare infrastructure. And that's in the social services sector, of which social welfare is just a component of the social services sector. So the oil money is to finance social services sector infrastructure, such as what we're doing in healthcare, education, social services infrastructure in education, social services and social services infrastructure in housing, building out the housing infrastructure, expanding deploying resources to meet the housing demand needs. We're moving now from just distributing house lots and some amount of turnkey to now more turnkey. We're talking about 8,000 housing units and capital. So for that reason, I excluded from a strict risk analysis standpoint. But yes, of course, if you look at it now from as the total revenue, then it's less. It's far less, the recurrent expenditure. But you also have to be mindful of the risk, because where does recurrent if you look at it within the long-term sustainable development, within the framework of sustainable development means how do we diversify the non-oil economy? And so that resources from oil revenue is to diversify and expand the non-oil economy in terms of its share of the total economy. So if we dissect GDP, non-oil GDP, when in the initial years when we added oil production to that equation, non-oil economy came down to 60%, from 100%, which was our total economy without oil, to 60%. Now the non-oil economy is about 30% of GDP. Now if we look at it from that angle alone, some people would say, oh, the non-oil economy is shrinking. No, it's not shrinking. In absolute terms, the non-oil economy is expanding. What is important, you have to look at the composition of non-oil economy. And if you look at the composition of non-oil economy, the agriculture and fishing sector, and forestry, the manufacturing sector, the construction sector, the services sector, if you look at the share of or the composition of non-oil economy of those sectors from the pre-oil period to the post-oil period, it has remained relatively unchanged. So what that means, if agriculture was 20-25% of GDP before oil, it remains at 20-25% of GDP. Services, if it was 40% of non-oil GDP, it remains 40%. So that is an important story there. The story is that the share of non-oil GDP to total economy is 30% from 60%, but the composition of non-oil economy remains the same. And that speaks to the impact of government's investment in the non-oil economy to keep growing it, to keep expanding output in those sectors, to keep transforming those sectors. Now, when oil production plateaus, right, when we reach the peak level and then it becomes stabilized at that level, then the share of oil or the share of non-oil economy will expand relative to the total size of GDP. And in order to achieve those targets, government has to continue to invest in all these other sectors.
Let me interject. I hear what you say, but given all that you have just said, doesn't it make sense to actually expose yourself to some extra risk to, because broadly speaking, there are two levels of citizens or two levels of people in your country, those who save and those who invest. Some people will not take the risk to go and invest, they'll just put their money in the bank and watch it. And as you said, they're losing value. And the people who can create value will go to the bank and borrow.
Right.
Good. So if the government wants to stimulate, for example, some more consumption for a definite period of time, and stimulate more savings to make more money available to investors, because investors will not come to your country unless there is sufficient consumption to make it make sense.
Yeah.
So then doesn't it make sense, the approach the government is taking?
I am not, yes, it makes perfect sense. I am not, understand me clearly, I am not opposed to the risk, the more risk that they're taking, because if we now look at our buffers, if you look at our reserve comprised of net reserve in the Bank of Guyana as well as net reserve in the NRF. If you look, as well as financial sector has some reserves as well. So if you look at our total reserve in the entire financial sector, that includes Bank of Guyana reserve, natural resource fund reserve, and the financial sector, the commercial banks, that is, we have maybe more than six. The last time I checked it was 8 months. I didn't check the recent numbers now with 2025 as yet. But the last time I checked, let's assume that remains, or it's even better, it was close to 8 months import cover. In other words, we have enough money in reserve that can pay off our total external debt. So the additional risk that we're taking, the additional fiscal risk that we're taking, it is necessary. I'm just doing it for the purpose of analysis and discussion.
Okay.
For people to understand. I'm not opposed to it, right? But it is for the simple purpose, or for the important purpose of analysis and discussion, for the general public to understand. You analyze the budget, you have to look at the entire framework, you have to look at the risk that we're taking. So while we're taking now more moderated risk, that risk is sort of adequately buffered against the overall macro reserves that we have in the event of external shocks, etc. But not because you have that level of great resilience and stability now in terms of the macro fundamentals and reserve, you're now going to force to go beyond where we are current, the kind of risk we're now taking. So it's important, because when budget is presented and all those who write about it and present so-called analysis and commentary, they don't talk about the risk, and we have to appreciate and understand the impact of the risk. Because the other important point that I was going to make earlier is that, so that is why I exclude all revenues from that equation. And how do we grow the non-oil revenue? The only way to grow that is by diversifying the economy in a sustainable way, by expanding the productive sectors of the economy and creating new growth poles, introducing new types of investment, creating new types of industries, the orange economy, for example, moving towards greater industrialization after we would have built the power plant and have cheaper energy, because that's the only way you're going to generate more wealth, create companies that are going to generate more revenue. From that they pay more income, from that they pay more taxes, and so the non-tax base will grow based on that expansionary fiscal stance. But we have to make the investment.
Joel, tell me if you accept it, and when you do, if you could offer economic financial explanation. Do you agree in the increase of 5,000 more for senior citizen and public assistance by 3,000. Public assistance means people that are in need. And so they go to the government and say, I don't have food to put on the table for these 4 children. The husband is a no good. Do you accept 3,000 more for public assistance and 5,000 more for senior citizen pension?
But I just answered the question.
That was the
I just
answer.
answered
What
the
he
question.
just gave was the answer.
That was the answer.
But I want to hear you
So-
say, yes, I accept.
Oh, okay.
So let me deal with it this way. Is that the only thing that group of people will be getting from the budget? The answer is no. They will be getting everything else in the budget.
Yeah, I know the traditional thing.
They'll be
Hospitals,
Right.
right,
But
social.
the question that you really should ask is not, do I accept $3,000 more? Can we afford to provide more, and how much more, and at what cost?
All right. Well, having said that,
Right.
we could afford to take VAT off for jewelry production.
We have a long list of consumables, hundreds of items, hundreds of consumables that are VAT free.
No, but I asked you specifically.
If
Could
we-
we afford? You said you asked the
If they
question.
couldn't afford to take it off, they wouldn't take it off.
Right, so they could afford to take it off, but they can't afford to put 10,000 more on senior citizen pension and 10,000 more on public assistance. In effect, that's what you're saying. Looked at from any analytical angle, you're saying they could afford to take
So
back
you know
off
why-
for
so
jewelry
you know why
production,
VAT
but they couldn't afford.
So you know, okay. So let's
You asked the
so let's
question,
do the
could the
math. So let's
government
do the
afford
math.
it?
Let's do the math. Let's do this, right? Let's take your number 10,000, right? How many pensioners do we have?
Well, let's stop there. There's
No.
There's a problem that we don't know.
Policy
We don't know how many
making,
pensioners.
so we have. I think the last number, it's more now. The last number
65.
was 70,000.
That is
Right.
That is last year.
70,000.
It's now 95.
So that's $700 million more a month. You're talking about $8.4 billion more a year, just for that one, right? Now let's put the goal. I see persons talking about this goal thing. Why VAT is removed from gold jewelry? You know what's the cost for gold now? You know where gold prices are now? 5,000. The last price I checked was $5,100 US. You know where gold prices was in 2013? Less than $1,000. $1,200, $1,500. Today it's $5,100. So who are the consumers of gold products? Who are the consumers of gold products?
You tell me, I'm listening.
No, it's a rhetorical question. If
Start the work,
government,
you
if
can't-
government don't do that, then then what that means is I can't afford, or a bachelor can't afford to buy a marriage ring for his wife, or for his wife to be.
That's stretching. That's
Right?
stretching.
No, that's
Hold on.
the reality.
There's a
Let's go to
second
public
more-
assistance.
That's the
Let
reality,
me,
right?
while I'm not the interviewee, but let me just plug something quickly that we are probably missing. There's specifically on the gold thing, and you know I'm with you when it comes to offering just a little more to pensioners and so on. And
A little more?
And,
much more.
in my case, I have a little formula which I think I could use to show why a few dollars more could be added. But outside of that, on the
But
gold,
show us
on the
those
gold
looking
thing,
at what-
just now, on the gold thing, there's a more fundamental reason why the VAT had to be removed. If you notice, your neighborhood goldsmiths, the number of
No,
them-
no, I wasn't
Hold on,
asking-
hold on.
No,
hold on.
but-
Let me finish,
No, you
Freddie.
can't- you
Freddie,
can't-
Freddie, let
that's
me
not how
finish.
economics work.
No, but
Freddie, let me finish.
I don't want it to feel that I'm against the thing.
No,
It was a
I am
juxta-
explaining
it was a
to you.
juxtaposition.
I'm explaining to you why it is necessary, even in the face of in your case, an unsatisfactory increase. It's an
Okay,
unsatisfactory increase. But you pick on the goal, people, and I'm explaining to the public why VAT removal from goal is as important. And one of the issues would be that if you look at the number of neighborhood goldsmiths, they have literally disappeared from the landscape. And the people who are making gold jewelry now are the more corporate establishment. And they are feeling the same squeeze that extinct the neighborhood gold man. It is threatening an entire industry with that refined gold right here in Guyana. Otherwise, you know, we can become export gold and then buy back.
Right. You see,
and the government is saving.
What's your
So Freddie, hold on.
But you increase, you said could they afford it? But they can afford to give every child in a class divided society like this, where they school children in Charlestown and they school children in the most elite area in Guyana.
All right.
They can afford to.
Those are the things I would shift, Freddie. So the bundle of money remains the same, but you just rejig it so that those who really needs it gets it.
Good.
And
So
that is how.
That is what I was getting
So
at.
how do we determine that's
But he's an economist and you
right?
a financial expert.
So let's put ourselves in the seat of a policy maker. What does a policy maker have to consider when crafting his budget? This is how much money we have. You know what's the fiscal deficit? The fiscal deficit is about 7% of GDP and about more than 30% of nominal GDP. So we're still running a deficit budget, right? How much do we spend on national security? Government has to take care of the safety and security of the country. Ultimately, safety and security of the citizens of the country. Government has to take care of the welfare of the security forces, the disciplined forces. Government has to ensure that they're adequately equipped with the resources they require to execute their mandate.
And salaries too. Right?
Hold on. So
too.
that's one consideration. So government has to decide what are the priorities, what are the pressing needs in this sector, how much are we going to allocate in that sector. Then government has to take care of the needs of all the framework of social services. There is health. We have a growing population. Population crossed the million mark. We're now 1 million. Yeah, 1,025,000.
I know the census that was released
Right.
at 900 or something.
Right, it's over. If you use the same trend currently from 22 to
It's
now,
over a
it's
million.
a million. The Ministry of Finance.
And especially if you
Good.
include the net migration.
So you have a growing population. Therefore, you have to invest more in the healthcare sector infrastructure to keep your health, to take care of the population health needs. Education. We came from a situation where, or the reality was such that less than 5% of our
No, we're in the same wavelength there.
We're in the same
We're in the same
but this is
wavelength. I just
hold
want to
on.
know, if you can't increase senior citizen pension,
But I'm
you
answering your
increase
question.
every school child getting,
I'm answering
increase-
your question, and when I'm finished answering your question, you then tell me, if you're in the policymaker seat, how you gonna allocate? This is what a policymaker has to take care of. A government has to take care of the needs of all
sure, I get you, I
in
understand.
society. Everyone
But-
in society, every class, every group,
No.
every segment. So we're talking about housing needs. I saw one person wrote in Starbuck News, the census proves that there is no housing crisis, that we added 6,000 housing housing units a year, but he fails to realize that that is not what determines demand for housing. What determines demand for housing is the thousands of backlog application in housing, which is about 50,000.
No, we are not at crossroads. I just want to know.
But people have to understand, Freddie Kissoon. I'm not speaking to you alone, I'm speaking to the public. People have to understand and appreciate what are the complexities and the considerations of a policymaker when crafting something such as the national budget. How much money are we earning? How much are we spending? These are all the priorities and the needs. How is this budget being financed? Where are we getting the money from? How we are sustaining this budget? And if we commit X more to a certain segment of the population, then how are we going to sustain that if we haven't built out the income streams to generate that? So we talk about health, we talk about safety and security, we talk about healthcare, you have sports, you have all the different other sectors and needs, agriculture, farmers, they have their needs have to be taken care of. You have over more than 80,000 new businesses registered in the last 5 years, more than 80,000 businesses. So you have a growing entrepreneurial class. We want all these people with entrepreneurial ambition, we want them to succeed as well. What is government doing about those people? Because those people will create value for the rest of other people too. They will create employment. They will pay taxes. So the provisions made for the development bank to provide that support is also important for that. So it's easy to sit and to extract and nitpick from the budget. Oh, why we didn't get so much more for cash grant? Why we didn't get so much more? Now let's put that in context. In 2010, social welfare support to cushioning household income was 1%. In 2010, it was 1%. Under the previous government, it left where the PPP brought it up to 2015, which was about 27%. 27%. I'm talking about social welfare support to cushion household income. You know where it is today? It's 50%.
I want to get to the question here.
So how do you determine what's not enough? In economics, it's
but
never enough.
you determine what was not enough, not me.
Never.
If you say they can't afford more for public assistance, no, let me get to the question.
Fiscally, a government has to ensure that its framework, it manages the country's finances in a sustainable and responsible manner. I begin my presentation by saying that the government is taking greater risk.
Let me get to the question.
The government is exposing the treasury to greater risk,
let me get to the
which
question.
is fine. Which is fine because we have buffers now. We have buffers now. Do you want them to take more risk?
Let me get to the two-dimensional question here. When ruling parties sit down to craft a budget, and now we're going to move a little bit away from economics to ideology and philosophy. When government sit down to craft a budget, ideology goes into a budget. It's not that men and women devoid of ideology sit down and craft a budget. They are, especially in the United States, there are people who sit down and craft a budget who feels that entrepreneurship should be encouraged. There are people who feel that certain sectors do not contribute essentially to the economy. So when you sit down and craft a budget, ideological strands are going into that budget, and some sectors, strata, classes may get some more than others. I think that is human nature. Hear what you responded by saying. Could they afford more for public assistance and old age pension? And I think the way you said it is you tend to believe that they couldn't. Could they afford to increase from 60,000 to 85,000? Every school child getting that? Could they afford that?
So that is an
No,
investment. So that is an investment, Freddie. What the government is doing for the school children
Yes.
is an investment in the future.
So
So I'm glad you pointed out that is an investment for the future.
Right.
We have.
you just answered
We have-
the question.
we have-
You know what you did there?
Hold on.
You didn't answer the question as an economist. You answered that question in an ideological
No,
context.
let me give you the
So,
ideological. Hold on. Let me
A
give
Marxist or a socialist could
Yeah,
say
let
the
me-
78,000 pensioners, there's no investment in
all
them.
of that ideology are all irrelevant to the population. You as a philosopher or a political scientist
With a Marxist socialist bent.
perform your analysis within those ideological framework. But let me now quote the Attorney General or paraphrase the Attorney General, who so very eloquently and simply put this matter to rest, or put this issue to rest. In his response to his opponents nitpicking items from the budget, as you're attempting to do, not that I understand
Not
what you're doing.
maliciously,
You're
yes.
stimulating the
I
discussion.
think I'm representing the
No,
class
no,
I
you're
come from. I
stimulating-
want to see
yeah,
the
yeah.
benefit
I
of it.
understand.
I'm unapologetically representing the class
Which
I
is fine.
originally came from.
Which is fine.
I would like to see them
Good, which is fine, which is
be
fine.
treated equally in the budget.
That's the only way we can have this a constructive discourse.
I'm also a senior citizen pensioner.
Good. So, the Attorney General, I appreciate what you're doing and recognize what you're doing. The Attorney General said, and to paraphrase him, that the government was elected democratically. The government won an election democratically. The government came in with a larger margin, won by a larger margin as they previously did. The government campaigned on an agenda. Their agenda is well documented, well articulated in the campaign. That campaign manifesto was informed, for the most part, through a broad-based consultative process from the public, through various mediums and channels. So what is reflected in the government agenda, a lot of it came from the people who voted them into office, and therefore they have a constitutional mandate. The president came after they were elected. The president last year outlined that agenda for the next 5 years at the Artisan Convention Center. That agenda now is what they're implementing through the budget. So we can argue academically about ideology, but the bottom line is that this is what the people voted for. They know what they voted for. This is the people's budget. You tell me, and I
No,
would say
no,
this,
no. I have
say-
to cut you there. I have to
No,
cut
no,
you
no.
because you're
Could
getting
anyone-
into the
could-
bizarre.
could-
Nobody knows what the population voted for. People vote for racial reason, cultural reason. People vote for class basis. People vote for as Barbicians. People vote as I want to
But-
see region.
and
You can't say
importantly-
you can't
Yeah.
monolithically lump the population
Most
together as you just
importantly,
did.
Most importantly, the people vote
There's
for their
70,
well-being.
there's 78,000 work that out to the population of Guyana. They are, Robert Prasad, the foreign secretary said there's 100,000 Venezuelans in Guyana. That's a tenth of the population. 78,000 people over 65 may not want the same thing a Barbician want, may not want the same thing an entrepreneur want. So that monolithic
So that is
presentation
why
about
we
the
have
population, that
is
cannot
why-
stand. That cannot
That is
stand.
why we have a democratic system. In a democratic society, you have a population of 1 million people, you can have 1 million different ideologies, and you're going to have 1 million different views and 1 million different
And 1 million fulfilled
And so
needs
that
and
is why-
demands.
and that is
1
why-
million
and that is
different
why-
dreams, demands.
And that is why you have an election for a government. The government is elected based on the majority of votes, and so the parliament and the entire government apparatus is so constituted. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you for the needs and the diverging needs and views of.
You said the budget was crafted based on what the people wanted.
That is a fact.
But what the people
That
want
is a fact.
is in hundreds of requests what the people want. About 78,000 pensioners want something different. The people of Lodgetown and Buxton and Charlestown probably want more than the 85,000 that you go to give to the rich children too.
Let me just plug something here quickly. Just an explanation, because as Joel said earlier, we are dealing with viewers and we want viewers to be better acquainted with, the facts. Now, in crafting a budget and determining what to hand out, especially when you have a frontier or an economy like Guyana, and to avoid your term you like to use, the Dutch disease, you have to be careful. You could bring on the Dutch disease easier if your recurrent expenses are too high, as Joel said earlier, than the non-oil economy. And because recurrent expenses are the hardest to control and to dial back on. So let's assume something happened in the world and oil prices plummet and some tragedy out in the sea and Guyana cannot ship oil, and our income, it will not go to zero, but it can dry up and suddenly too. The hardest things to control are the recurrent expenses. The cash grant, you can stop it. The building out, you can stretch it out longer, like building a road to let them and so on. Some of these things you can stop. But once you commit to a salary, once you commit to a pension, once you commit to these things, you can't just stop them. You can't go back to people and say that I'm taking back part of your salary, or scraping out part of your pension. So, in asking for more, you gotta be cognizant of that as well. So, Freddie, again, I'm saying, I think it should be more, but not blanket. You have to rejig some, and I use your example that you gave, that I do not believe in universal cash transfer. I do not believe in universal handing out of school children grant to every person. I think it should be tailored.
That's all I was saying.
It should be tailored, and then you transfer some of that, and then but the top up to, because you're asking for 10,000, it might not get there in realistic economic terms. Even if you reject some of that, it still won't get there.
On the same point, Leonard, what I would say is, let's take the request. Let's treat the request with some degree of seriousness. Let's add increase pension or any other social welfare item by $10,000 or whatever number. Where are we taking it from? Are we going to take it from the 200,000 school children? Are we going to take it from housing? Instead of 8,000, we're going to do 4,000? Are we going to take it from defense and security? Instead of their bonuses, or we invest in the technology and improving national safety and security, should we hold this back? That's what a policymaker is facing.
Or we raise taxes. And I was saying to another person, one of the easiest taxes to raise in Guyana is the tax on gasoline. That's easy. The government could do that tomorrow, overnight. But
that will
it compensate back
exactly?
Will it compensate back?
Because fuel is an input for almost everything.
And we could make that money that Freddie is talking about right away by adding some percentage on fuel, right? So
and if you do that, let's.
I am just asking you to appreciate what an economist will have to go through.
So here, it doesn't end there. The analysis doesn't end there. So fuel is a major input in production as well, not just transportation and your vehicle, but production
which means
generally.
prices will go up.
So prices go, production costs.
And they increase the
No, but
pension, you will lose it back.
No. You got listen. This is not for you, Freddie. This is for the viewers. So the prices for a major input commodity goes up. So your input cost goes up, production cost goes up. The consumer may not afford everything, so demand falls. When demand falls, income falls. When income falls, tax revenue falls. When tax revenue falls, government can't support the social welfare. They can't sustain it.
I agree with what was said. What we're talking about here is cross purpose. I would say I'm talking here about giving vulnerable people, working class people, money that could be found and not pressure the government coffers. And my methodology is a means test. Instead of giving...
So that's the fundamental flaw in your ideology, Freddie. Money is not found, money is earned. And when you earn it, you have to sustain it. So,
that doesn't contradict what I'm saying.
So,
finish
you don't
this
find money. Freddie, money is not found. Money has to be created. Money has to be, to create money, you have to earn money. And when you earn it, you have to sustain it. And that is why the only way to earn...
I was just showing you how...
No, but I'm showing you how it is.
Let Freddie take
In order to earn that money, you have to create it. To create the money, you have to expand the productive sectors of the economy, so that the productive sectors could generate that new money. So it's not this simple.
All you're saying there, you're giving an ideological position.
It's not this simple. Money don't fall from the sky.
No.
Money don't be found.
How to find money for A, B, C, D?
You have to earn it and sustain it.
But you increase from 60,000 to 85,000 to school children. And some of who, when they come, they go to the elite eating place and have their lunch. All I was saying, and all I'm saying, and all I will say,
when those children finish writing CXC, those children will supply the workforce.
You see, you know what you're doing there?
No.
You know what? You are not giving an economic viewpoint there. You're giving an ideological position on life and how a country should be run. Now, bear with me. You just evocatively said, when you replied to the increase for school children, you said that it is an investment. So you are telling me...
Is it not an investment?
It is. And I am saying you are not 100% right. You are 1,000% right. But in my ideological world, the state has to take care of those 78,000 people who, after giving 40 years of their lives to build a country, they're no longer an investment.
You have a fundamentally flawed misconception.
Freddie, do you know, one quick thing, Freddie, do you know that in some countries, even pension is conditional? Guyana has had universal pension for the longest while, but do you know in some countries, even, I'm not talking about a pension that you work and accumulate at your workplace. I'm talking about this social pension that we have, old age pension. In many countries, it is a means test to get it.
That's the point I was going to
make. I don't have a problem with means test. I don't have a problem with means test.
A lot of people...
A pension, there are 75-year-old people who have investments and have shares.
Yeah, but listen...
There are those who serve the education system and don't have anything. I taught for 26 years at UG. I don't have shares, I don't have land, so there should be a means test for, as you rightfully say, for pension, for school children grant, but essentially I don't think we're talking at cross purposes. We're just talking about the methodology.
No, we've just...
But you the guests have the final say, we got a minute left.
We've just buried an important factual clarification that I clarified last night on another program.
But bring it back quickly.
There is a perception or a misconception or a view by many, held by many, that this old age pension is your social, your service pension. That is, as Leonard correctly says, many countries don't have it. That was introduced by this government many years ago to supplement pension. Senior citizens or pensioners are still collecting many of them are still collecting their service pension, what they work their entire life for and serve this country. That's their service pension, and this
Go on.
And this is
Go
on top
on.
of
Tell
that.
us how much is your service pension.
No.
You are 3 times younger than me. I am a senior pension. I'm a pensioner with 26 years at UG. Go on. Tell us how much those people who spend 40 years at Bishops, 40 years at UG, you want to find out how much they're collecting? When I left UG at 26 years of teaching at UG, my pension was 52,000. 52,000. You know how much it is now? It's roughly about the same. But Joel, we gotta go. Thanks to being with us. Always
You're welcome.
We were looking at the budget with our perennial guest, Joel Bhagwandin. We hope you like the show.